Hello everyone, this is Ujjwal Whatifs and I am back with a part 3 of this series. And before we start, let's reveal the answer to my last question. It was Spopovich and Yamu. So the one who gave the correct answer are, at Eric Taylor-N8S, at Arunamnath, and at Rafikarosa268. A loud shout out for all of them. Keep it up guys and thank you for participating in my quizzes. Now, let's begin. Location Kamar-Taj. 2.5 years had passed since Naruto Uzumaki walked through the Ancient One's portal and unknowingly stepped into an entirely new chapter of his life. During that time, the ancient halls of Kamar-Taj had witnessed something they had never seen before. A shinobi learning the mystic arts. And not just learning them. Devouring them. Naruto Uzumaki had become a legend. Among the masters and students of Kamar-Taj, he had earned a rather intimidating nickname. The monster of mystic arts. Not because he was cruel. Not because he enjoyed hurting people. And certainly not because he had actually eaten anyone. The nickname came from one simple fact. Naruto was ridiculously talented. Mordo had taken years to master the mystic arts. Caecilius had spent years refining his abilities. Stephen Strange, even with his extraordinary natural talent, would eventually require 9 months' time to reach mastery. Naruto, 2 to 3 months. That was all it had taken him to master the fundamental mystic arts. And he had done it even without using shadow clones. That fact had left the Ancient One completely stunned. The first time Naruto successfully created a portal after only a few weeks of training, she had simply stared at him completely speechless. The second time he successfully manipulated multiple spell constructs simultaneously, she had narrowed her eyes. The third time he began combining different mystical techniques without being instructed to do so. She had finally asked the question that every teacher eventually asked when confronted with an absurdly talented student. How? Naruto had shrugged. Watched it in the movies. What? I mean, I read the books. The Ancient One had stared at him. Those books took me years to master. Naruto had awkwardly scratched his cheek. I read it twice. The Ancient One had briefly questioned every decision that had brought her to this moment. Still, Naruto's rapid progress had not been because of shadow clones. That was intentional. The Ancient One had forbidden him from using them during his mystic arts training. Her reason was simple. She wanted to know Naruto's true potential. If hundreds of shadow clones learned every spell simultaneously, then Naruto could potentially master decades of knowledge within days. That wouldn't tell her how naturally gifted Naruto himself was. So she had imposed one simple rule. No shadow clones during formal mystic arts training. Naruto had accepted, mostly because he understood her reasoning. And partly because the moment she said it, he realized she was absolutely serious. The Ancient One wasn't someone you wanted to argue with. Especially when she could casually knock your soul out of your body. After mastering the fundamentals, however, Naruto's progress became even more ridiculous. He mastered advanced shields, energy constructs, dimensional manipulation, portal creation, astral projection, mystic weapons, binding spells, mirror dimension techniques, and countless other applications. But he never stopped being a shinobi. That was the most important difference. Naruto didn't replace his ninja abilities with magic. He combined them. His chakra remained his foundation. The mystic arts became another weapon in his arsenal. And the results were terrifying. The masters had begun referring to him as the strongest candidate for the position of Sorcerer Supreme after the Ancient One. Even the Ancient One herself had quietly accepted that possibility, and she even started to plan her early retirement. Though she would never say it too loudly. She didn't want Naruto becoming even more arrogant. He already had enough confidence. The scene shifted deeper into Kamar-Taj. Morning sunlight poured through the enormous windows of the training hall. Ancient stone pillars surrounded the chamber. Incense burned quietly. Mystical symbols glowed faintly across the floor. And at the center of the room sat Naruto. His legs were crossed. His hands rested upon his knees. His eyes were closed. Around him floated several complex golden-orange mystical constructs. They rotated slowly through the air. Each was different. Each contained layers upon layers of magical geometry. Naruto's breathing remained steady. His chakra circulated through his body. Mystic energy flowed alongside it. For the past several hours, he had been working on one particularly difficult technique. He had already learned how to construct it. Now he was doing something even more important. Stabilizing it. A tiny fluctuation appeared in the magical construct. Naruto's eyebrow twitched. Don't. The construct trembled. Don't you dare. It trembled again. Naruto's eye twitched. Come on. The entire construct suddenly began destabilizing. Naruto opened one eye. Seriously. The spell exploded into a harmless cloud of golden sparks. Naruto sighed. Alright. Back to concentration. At the far end of the same training hall, tucked beside one of the ancient stone pillars, was a small tea lounge overlooking the courtyard. The atmosphere there was considerably more peaceful than the training area. A steaming cup of tea rested on the table. Seated beside it was the Ancient One herself, the Sorcerer Supreme, calmly observing Naruto's training taking place before her. Beside her sat Mordo, one of her most accomplished students and a master of the mystic arts in his own right. For several minutes, Mordo had said nothing. He simply watched. His eyes followed the blonde figure standing at the center of the training hall. Naruto. The young man was surrounded by dozens of floating mystical constructs, each one rotating independently while golden-orange energy flowed between them. One construct resembled a circular shield. Another continuously changed shape. A third was composed of several rotating rings of mystical energy. Naruto manipulated all of them simultaneously while maintaining a newly learned spell in front of himself. Mordo slowly exhaled. Even after all this time, his expression remained one of disbelief. I still find his talent difficult to comprehend. The Ancient One took another sip of tea. You are not the first. Mordo glanced toward her, and certainly not the last. The Ancient One's lips curved into a faint smile. Mordo shook his head. I have spent years studying these arts. So have many of the masters. And he watched Naruto effortlessly reshape one of the constructs. Understands them. The Ancient One smiled. He does not merely understand them. He sees possibilities within them. Mordo's expression changed slightly. That was the part that concerned him. Naruto didn't treat magic like a collection of spells. He treated it like another language. Another system that could be combined with everything he already knew. Chakra, Fuinjutsu, Sage techniques, space-time ninjutsu, and now, mystic arts. The combinations Naruto occasionally proposed had already given several masters headaches. Mordo had personally witnessed Naruto spend an entire afternoon theorizing about combining Flying Thunder God with Sling Ring. He had decided never to ask what the final result was. Some questions were safer unanswered. But then Mordo's attention shifted, and his expression changed completely. He looked past Naruto, toward another student sitting several feet away. A young woman in her early 20s. Long black hair, a focused expression, standard Kamar-Taj trainee robes. A faint crimson aura surrounded her body. Surprisingly, it was Wanda Maximoff, the future Scarlet Witch in flesh and blood. She sat perfectly still, her hands resting against her knees as red energy danced gently around her fingers. Unlike Naruto, Wanda's power wasn't something she had developed through years of formal training. It was something deeper, something ancient, something innate. The first time Wanda had entered Kamar-Taj, the masters had immediately sensed that there was something profoundly different about her. Her raw magical potential was extraordinary. And, more disturbingly, it surpassed even Naruto's. Mordo stared at her for several seconds. The Ancient One nodded. Yes. Mordo's eyes narrowed. Her potential is even greater than his. It is. There was no hesitation in the Ancient One's answer. Mordo looked back toward Naruto. Then toward Wanda. How is that possible? The Ancient One smiled faintly. Talent does not always announce itself in the same way. Wanda's crimson energy suddenly intensified. The air around her rippled. A small mystical construct formed between her palms without her consciously shaping it. Mordo's eyebrows rose and he stood from his tablet. She isn't even using the hand techniques to cast a spell. No. The Ancient One watched Wanda carefully. She is simply expressing with her mind. The bold woman's eyes shined as she continued. Her potential is superior to Naruto, not because she learns things faster than him. No, she is extraordinary because her profound understanding of magic is deeper than anyone in this sanctuary, even deeper than me. That was what made Wanda so extraordinary. And so dangerous too. Mordo's eyes widened in shock. Then the Sorcerer Supreme continued. If she had come to Kamar-Taj seeking guidance instead of eventually becoming involved in HYDRA's experiments in Sokovia years ago, her life might have been completely different. She could have become one of the greatest mystics the world had ever known. The Ancient One knew exactly how much suffering Wanda and Pietro had endured. She had sensed fragments of it when Naruto brought the twins to Kamar-Taj roughly 6 months earlier after rescuing them from HYDRA. The twins had lost their parents. They had grown up surrounded by war. They had been manipulated by people who saw their pain as an opportunity. And eventually, HYDRA had turned them into experiments. The Ancient One had wanted to help them. But there was a principle she could not simply abandon. The masters of the mystic arts did not interfere in ordinary human conflicts. They protected Earth from mystical threats. They defended reality from forces beyond ordinary human understanding. They did not decide which nation was right. They did not interfere in wars. They did not dictate humanity's politics. And they certainly didn't appoint themselves as Earth's global babysitters. Though Wanda was different, and her potential was simply too dangerous to ignore. Especially because the Ancient One knew what might eventually come for her. Chthon. The name alone carried weight. The Ancient One had seen possible futures surrounding Wanda. Futures where her power became corrupted. Futures where the Darkhold entered her hands. Futures where the Scarlet Witch became something capable of terrifying even the greatest mystics. Still, after knowing all of this, she couldn't simply force Wanda down a different path. She break the rules of the Centrum. She can't affect the timeline. But Naruto. The Ancient One's gaze shifted toward him. Naruto was different. He was a singularity, single being in all the multiverse. And theoretically he won't affect the scared timeline. The path issues will become the new future of this timeline. Means, he can affect other people's destiny without leading this timeline to a total collapse. And he had already proven it into existence when he rescued Wanda and Pietro from HYDRA. Even after that big of a change, the timeline hadn't collapsed, it just shifted to the path Naruto took. The Ancient One's eyes softened. Perhaps that was exactly what Wanda needed. Perhaps Naruto could influence her without controlling her. Perhaps he could help her understand her power before something else taught her first. And perhaps he could change a future even the Sorcerer Supreme had once believed inevitable. Interesting. Mordo glanced at her. You believe he can change her destiny? The Ancient One remained silent for several seconds. Her eyes stayed on Naruto. I believe Naruto has already changed more destinies than he realizes. Mordo frowned. That doesn't answer my question. No. The Ancient One smiled. But it is the answer you need. Mordo sighed. Sometimes I truly hate your answers. The Ancient One calmly lifted her teacup. That is because you are always looking for answers when you should be looking for meaning. Mordo stared at her. That sounded better in your head, didn't it? The Ancient One paused, then took another sip. Perhaps. Mordo couldn't help smiling. A few meters away, another figure was making considerably less philosophical progress. Silver white hair, athletic build, sharp blue eyes, and the unmistakable expression of someone who had become bored with meditation approximately 30 seconds after being told to sit still. Pietro Maximoff, Quicksilver. While Wanda meditated, Pietro was training. Not magic, martial arts, and he was moving incredibly fast, much faster than his main timeline version. His training routine was a strange but effective combination of judo, tai chi and karate. Naruto had designed much of it specifically for him. Pietro's speed already made him dangerous. But speed without technique was predictable. So Naruto had decided to fix that. The result was terrifying. Pietro moved through a series of combinations so quickly that his punches and kicks were practically invisible to ordinary eyes. Thud. A wooden training dummy cracked. Pietro vanished. Thud. Another dummy shattered. He spun, blocked, countered, pivoted. His movements were fluid rather than reckless. Every strike had purpose. Every step was calculated. His speed simply amplified the technique. Pietro suddenly stopped. He looked at the destroyed training dummies. I think I went too hard. Naruto glanced over at him. You think? Pietro shrugged. They were asking for it. They're wooden. They looked at me funny. Naruto stared at him. You're becoming more like me. Wanda opened one eye. That's not necessarily a bad thing. Pietro grinned. It is absolutely a good thing. The Ancient One finally rose from the tea lounge. Mordo followed. Their footsteps echoed across the training hall. Naruto remained seated. Wanda continued meditating. Pietro finished another combination, then stopped. Silence settled over the room. Naruto opened his eyes. Good morning. The Ancient One smiled, and she greeted back. Wanda heard him and opened her eyes as well. Her crimson aura faded around her fingertips. She immediately noticed the Ancient One and Mordo standing before them. Wanda quickly stood and bowed at the Sorcerer Supreme. Mordo gave her a respectful nod. Pietro suddenly vanished. A silver blur crossed the room. A moment later, he appeared beside Wanda. Mordo raised an eyebrow. Pietro, what? You were supposed to remain still during meditation. I was meditating while moving. Mordo stared at him. That is not how meditation works. Pietro grinned. It is now. Naruto immediately covered his mouth. A laugh escaped. Wanda shook her head. He's impossible. The Ancient One smiled. Perhaps. Her gaze shifted toward Naruto. Then Wanda. Then Pietro. Three extraordinary young people. Three wildly different powers. and 3 futures that had already diverged from anything the Ancient One had once expected. Naruto had arrived from beyond this universe's natural order. Wanda possessed magical potential that could one day rival forces beyond Earth. Pietro possessed speed that allowed him to move faster than almost any ordinary human could perceive. And somehow, they had ended up training together. The Ancient One looked at them for a long moment. Perhaps the future wasn't something to predict anymore. Perhaps it was something they were creating. Naruto stretched his arms. So, he looked toward the Ancient One. What are we doing today? The Ancient One's expression became slightly mysterious. Today, she raised one hand. A golden portal began forming beside her. I believe you are finally ready for something more difficult. Naruto's eyes immediately lit up. Finally. Mordo sighed. Wanda smiled. Pietro grinned. And somewhere deeper within Kamar-Taj, several ancient masters suddenly felt an inexplicable sense of dread. Because whenever the Ancient One told Naruto something more difficult, there was a very good chance he got to meet another new mythical creature. The golden portal shimmered in front of them, its circular edge crackling with mystical energy as sparks danced across the stone floor of Kamar-Taj. Naruto stood up immediately. Finally, he stepped through without hesitation. Wanda followed a few steps behind him. As they walked through the portal, the Ancient One and Mordo followed behind, while Pietro casually walked alongside them. The portal closed with a soft burst of golden sparks. Wanda's eyes remained forward for a few moments. Then, almost without realizing it, they drifted toward Naruto. His blonde hair caught the warm light of the surrounding mystical energy. There was a faint smile on his face. Not the arrogant grin he sometimes wore when showing off. Something softer, almost peaceful, and suddenly, a memory surfaced. A memory Wanda hadn't thought about in quite some time. A memory of the day in this blonde idiot had saved them, not from the world, but from themselves. Flashback, with a third-party POV. 6 months earlier in Sokovia, HYDRA had believed itself untouchable. They were wrong. For months, Naruto had quietly searched for HYDRA's remaining operations. He didn't rush. He didn't attack blindly. He knew better. After the Battle of New York, HYDRA had gone deeper underground, hiding behind legitimate organizations and secret facilities. Naruto's shadow clones were perfect for finding them. Thousands of clones could search different regions simultaneously. One could infiltrate a warehouse. Another could follow a suspicious vehicle. Another could investigate financial records. Another could simply sit in a cafe copyright and listen to people talk. Naruto had eventually discovered several HYDRA facilities scattered throughout Sokovia. And he didn't destroy any of them. Not yet, because attacking one facility would alert the others. Instead, he patiently mapped them, one by one, until eventually, he found it. The primary HYDRA facility controlled by Baron Wolfgang von Strucker. Naruto stood on a distant rooftop, staring toward the heavily fortified compound. His sensory abilities detected dozens of armed personnel, advanced weapons, laboratories, and 2 familiar chakra-like signatures that weren't actually chakra. Found you. His eyes narrowed, but then something else caught his attention. 2 powerful energy signatures, one crimson, one superhumanly fast. Naruto's expression changed. The twins. He knew what that meant. Wanda and Pietro had already received their powers. The timeline had reached the point he had been waiting for. Naruto could have attacked the facility himself. He could have ended HYDRA's operation within minutes. But that wasn't what he wanted. Not yet. Instead, he pulled out a communication device. He had acquired Captain America's contact information some time ago. How? That was a story for another time. Naruto sent the coordinates of Strucker's base to Steve Rogers. Then he disappeared. Let's see how this plays out. The message was, Major HYDRA Base, Base Commander, Baron Wolfgang von Strucker, coordinates. Hurry up. A few hours later, the Avengers attacked. The HYDRA facility erupted into chaos. Explosions shook the compound. Quinjet engines roared overhead. Steve Rogers led the assault. Tony Stark blasted through defensive positions. Thor smashed through heavily armored troops. Clint fired arrow after arrow. Natasha moved through the facility like a ghost. Captain stopped for a second. Why do I feel we are being used by that maelstrom? But he didn't get to continue as one of the HYDRA soldier came at him with energy blaster. Steve dodged that energy blast and knocked that guy away with his frisbee. Somewhere inside the chaos, Naruto watched. He had transformed himself with a transformation jutsu into a HYDRA soldier. Helmet, uniform, weapon, the whole package. He looked down at himself. I really need to stop borrowing people's identities. A nearby HYDRA soldier glanced at him. Naruto immediately saluted. "Hail HYDRA." The soldier nodded. "Hail HYDRA." Naruto walked away. I really wanted to try saying this for so long. Soon, the Avengers eventually broke through Strucker's defenses. That was Naruto's signal. He slipped inside, and soon, his shadow clones had mapped the facility. He knew exactly where the Maximoff twins were being held. Naruto reached the cell, then stopped. Behind the glass stood Wanda and Pietro. The two were exhausted, confused, angry, and frightened. Naruto looked at them for a moment. Then at the guards. He sighed. This is going to be awkward. The guards turned. Naruto moved. 2 punches. 2 unconscious guards. He opened the cell. Wanda immediately raised her hands. Crimson energy erupted. "Stay back." Naruto raised both hands. "Easy." He looked at Wanda, and his eyes got widened, because in front of him stood someone resembling Elizabeth Olsen but even prettier. He lost concentration for a second because of this. Then Pietro appeared in front of Wanda in a silver blur. "Who are you?" Naruto snapped out of it, then gave a small smile. "Someone who's getting you out of here." Before either twin could react, Naruto grabbed them. A flying thunder god formula activated beneath their feet. Flash. The 3 vanished. Kamar-Taj. Wanda and Pietro appeared inside one of the training halls. They immediately stumbled backward. Wanda's hands ignited with crimson energy. Pietro moved so quickly that the surrounding air stirred. "Where are we?" Naruto calmly stepped away. "Somewhere HYDRA can't reach you." Pietro glared. "Why did you bring us here?" Wanda's expression hardened. "We weren't finished." Naruto raised an eyebrow. "Finished with what?" "Tony Stark." The anger in Wanda's voice was unmistakable. "He destroyed our lives." Pietro nodded. "We were going to make him pay." Naruto stared at them. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he sighed. "You know it wasn't Tony who bombed your town. But it was him who built that bomb," hissed Wanda. Naruto looked at both of them second and then asked a simple question. "So, according to your logic, if I am driving a car and accidentally cause an accident that kills someone, does that mean the victim's family should hold the car company accountable instead of me, the person who was actually driving?" The twins looked at each other in utter shock. They repeated that same question in their mind. Then Naruto sighed and reached into his storage seal. Several files appeared, then photographs, then documents. He placed them on the table. "You want revenge? Fine, but at least know who you're actually angry with." Wanda slowly picked up one of the photographs. It showed a ruined building. A destroyed home. The date was clearly visible. 2012, Sokovia. Her fingers tightened around the paper. Naruto continued. "The missile that destroyed your home. Do you want to know who actually pushed the button?" Wanda looked up, eyes full of confusion and hatred. "Who?" Naruto placed another document in front of her. "HYDRA." Silence. Pietro immediately grabbed the document. His eyes moved across the page. "No." Naruto nodded. "HYDRA was responsible for the bombing. They were the ones who profited from your suffering. They were the ones who turned your grief into hatred. And then," Naruto looked directly at them. "They recruited you." The twins stood frozen. Neither spoke. Naruto had sent clones throughout the facility specifically to search for this information. It had taken dozens of clones almost half an hour to locate the relevant records among HYDRA's enormous collection of classified files. But they had found them. And Naruto had taken everything directly related to the bombing. There was no ambiguity, no speculation, no manipulation. The evidence was undeniable. Wanda's hands began trembling. This whole time, her voice cracked. Pietro stared at the photograph. They knew what happened to our parents. And they still." His voice broke. Naruto remained silent. He didn't need to say anything. The truth was already doing enough damage. Wanda's crimson energy flickered uncontrollably. Tears formed in her eyes. "We hated him." She looked down. "All these years, we hated the wrong person." Pietro punched the wall. Boom. A crack spread across the stone. Blood poured from his fist. Naruto didn't stop him. Let him get it out. Wanda finally broke down. Naruto quietly stepped closer. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You were misguided. That wasn't your fault." Wanda looked at him through tear-filled eyes. For the first time since arriving at Kamar-Taj, she truly looked at him. Not as the strange blonde ninja who had kidnapped them from HYDRA. Not as the powerful man who had appeared from nowhere. But as the person who had saved them. The person who had stopped them from making a mistake they might have regretted for the rest of their lives. Naruto smiled gently. "You don't have to forgive Tony for creating that bomb. But don't let HYDRA decide who you become." Wanda's lips trembled. "What do we do now?" Naruto extended his hand. "Train." Pietro looked at him. "Train." Control your powers. Understand them. Then, Naruto's eyes hardened. We deal with HYDRA. Pietro slowly looked at his sister. Wanda looked at Naruto's extended hand. After several seconds, she reached out. Her fingers wrapped around his hand. I'll do it. Pietro smiled. Me too. Naruto nodded. Good. Then he remembered something. Oh. He snapped his fingers. A small scroll appeared. Pietro raised an eyebrow. What? Naruto smiled. One more thing. He unrolled the scroll. Loki's scepter appeared on his hand. Pietro frowned. What is that? Naruto looked toward the doorway. Something Strucker is going to miss until the final moment of his death. Back at Strucker's facility, the Avengers were still fighting their way through the remaining HYDRA forces. Strucker had no idea that his two most valuable assets had already disappeared. And neither did he know that the Loki scepter was gone. Naruto had taken it, not for himself, not yet. He simply couldn't allow HYDRA to continue experimenting with the Mind Stone. The moment the scepter disappeared from the facility, the future changed again. Hopefully no sentient Ultron, no massacre at the Avengers party, no Sokovia lifted into the sky, no vision created through Ultron's body. Well, we have to make some sacrifice for something better, aka eliminating a love rival before he could even be born. And, most importantly, no Wanda being pushed toward the path toward Chthon. Naruto was still only 50% sure because Tony, he is not sure if that guy can still create sentient artificial intelligence or not, you know, the curse of knowledge and all. Naruto had no idea how many consequences that one decision would create. He only knew one thing. He had saved 2 lives. And perhaps, an entire future. Back to present-day Kamar-Taj. Wanda blinked. She found herself walking through the corridor behind Naruto once again. Her gaze remained on him. The same blonde hair, the same blue eyes, the same smile, except now, she knew exactly what that smile meant. Her lips slowly curved upward. Naruto glanced back. Their eyes met. Wanda immediately looked away. A faint blush appeared across her cheeks. Naruto raised an eyebrow and smirk. And with a teasing tone asked, "You okay?" Wanda nodded quickly. Yes, absolutely. Naruto stared at her. You're turning red. I'm not. You definitely are. It's warm. Naruto looked around the cold surrounding of snow. It's freezing. Wanda's blush deepened. Naruto gave a teasing smirk. He loved to tease her like that. Pietro, walking nearby, looked between them. His eyes narrowed. Then a mischievous grin appeared. Oh, Wanda immediately glared at him. Don't. Pietro raised both hands. I didn't say anything. You were about to. I was thinking. Stop thinking. Naruto looked between the twins and smirked, fully knowing what's going on between those siblings, and asked teasingly. Should I be concerned? Pietro smiled. Very. Wanda groaned. The Ancient One, walking several steps behind them, quietly watched the interaction. A faint smile appeared on her face. She had seen countless futures, countless possibilities, countless tragedies, but this one was new, and perhaps that was exactly what she wanted. Naruto had already changed Wanda's past. Now, perhaps he could help her change her future. The group finally reached the enormous training chamber. The Ancient One stepped forward. Today, you're going to learn another lesson. Naruto's eyes immediately lit up. Wanda stood beside him. Pietro cracked his knuckles. Mordo sighed. The Ancient One raised her hand. Golden energy began forming around her. Today, she smiled. Her words echoed through the enormous training chamber. It's certainly going to be interesting. A few moments later, Naruto, Wanda, and Pietro stood before another golden portal. Naruto stared at it, then at the Ancient One, then back at the portal. Seeing the portal, Naruto suddenly felt something was off. Why do I suddenly feel like you're about to throw us into something dangerous? The Ancient One smiled. Because you are learning. That wasn't an answer. It was the correct answer. Mordo stood beside her with his arms folded, looking entirely too calm, but Naruto noticed a hint of smirk leaving his lips. He narrowed his eyes. You both look suspicious. Pietro leaned toward Wanda. He's right. Wanda nodded. The Ancient One simply opened the portal wider. Beyond it was an entirely different world. A violent mountain wind immediately rushed through the portal, carrying tiny crystals of snow with it. Towering peaks surrounded the group on every side, their slopes covered in thick layers of untouched snow. Far below, enormous cliffs disappeared into a sea of clouds. Naruto stepped through first. His sandals sank slightly into the snow. He looked around. Okay. He rubbed his arms. That's cold. Pietro stepped through behind him and immediately pulled his robes tighter. Very cold. Wanda quietly followed, her dark hair blowing in the freezing wind. Mordo emerged next. The Ancient One stepped through last. She looked completely unaffected by the temperature. Of course she did. Naruto glanced at her. You could have warned us we were going to Antarctica. This isn't Antarctica. That's somehow less comforting. The Ancient One simply smiled. Mordo looked toward the mountains. There is a creature somewhere in this region. Naruto raised an eyebrow. What kind? The Ancient One calmly answered. A mythical beast. Naruto's eyes immediately brightened. How mythical. Very. How dangerous. The Ancient One looked at him. Extremely. Naruto's grin widened. Mordo noticed it. Why do you look happy? Nothing. Naruto's grin became even wider. Absolutely nothing. The Ancient One suddenly raised her hand. A golden portal began forming behind her. Naruto's smile disappeared. Wait. The Ancient One stepped toward it. Your task is simple. Find the creature. Kill it. Do not allow it to escape. It has already caused too much destruction. Now, it's affecting the energy balance of this dimension, indirectly affecting the energy balance of the Earth. Naruto blinked. You're coming with us, right? The Ancient One smiled. No. Naruto looked at the Ancient One. Wait a second. He pointed toward the surrounding mountains. You said this was our next lesson. The Ancient One calmly nodded. It is. Then why are you leaving? Mordo stood beside her, already looking amused. The Ancient One gave Naruto one of those faint smiles. The kind that immediately made him suspicious. This is a test. Naruto blinked. A test. For all three of you. Her gaze moved toward Wanda and Pietro. You have each learned enough to begin applying your abilities outside the safety of Kamar-Taj. Then her eyes returned to Naruto. And specially for you, Naruto. Naruto's eyebrow rose. Me, yes. What exactly am I being tested on? The Ancient One's smile widened slightly. You'll find out. Naruto stared at her. That's not an answer. It is the only answer you're getting. Before Naruto could complain further, the Ancient One walked toward the golden portal. Mordo stepped toward it. Naruto pointed at them. You're seriously just going to leave us here? The Ancient One smiled. Good luck. Wait. The portal closed. Silence returned. Naruto stared at the empty space where the Ancient One and Mordo had disappeared. That woman is terrifying. Pietro nodded. Absolutely. Wanda quietly agreed. She knew exactly what she was doing. Naruto sighed. Of course she did. Then suddenly, roar. A terrifying roar shook the mountains. Snow cascaded from the cliffs. Pietro's eyes widened. Holy moly. Wanda immediately raised her hands, crimson energy gathering around her fingers. Naruto's expression changed. The surprise lasted only a moment. Then his grin returned. Oh, he cracked his knuckles. Now this is what we call test. Meanwhile, Kamar-Taj. The Ancient One and Mordo had already returned to Kamar-Taj. They were seated in one of the observation chambers, where a large magical projection floated in the air before them. The scene displayed the snowy mountains in perfect detail. Naruto, Wanda, Pietro, and the enormous mythical beast approaching them. Mordo folded his arms. Are you certain they'll be alright? The Ancient One didn't even look worried. They'll be fine. Mordo glanced at her. The creature is a chimera. I know. 5 meters tall. I know. Fire breathing. I know. Extremely strong. I know. Mordo sighed. Then why do you sound so relaxed? The Ancient One finally looked at him. Because Naruto is there. Mordo stared. The Ancient One continued calmly. You still underestimate him. Mordo frowned. He's powerful. I understand that. No. The Ancient One shook her head. You don't. Mordo looked toward the projection again. The chimera roared as Naruto stepped forward. The Ancient One's expression became thoughtful. Naruto is far more powerful than you think. She paused. At this point, even I don't know where his limit stands. Mordo's eyes widened. For the first time, genuine shock appeared on his face. The Ancient One had lived for more than 7 centuries. She had trained countless masters. She had fought beings from dimensions most humans couldn't comprehend. And yet, she was admitting that she didn't know Naruto's limit. Mordo looked back toward the projection. How is that possible? He has only been studying the mystic arts for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. The Ancient One simply smiled. And yet here we are. Mordo stared at her. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't being polite. She was completely serious. That realization was somehow more frightening than the chimera itself. Mordo slowly turned toward her. If that's the case, he pointed toward the projection. Why are we even testing him? The Ancient One looked at him. Then, A mischievous smile appeared. Mordo froze. He had seen that smile before. It was the same smile she had worn before leaving Naruto and the twins in the mountains. Oh no, the Ancient One calmly leaned back. This isn't really a test for Naruto. Mordo blinked. Then what is it? She looked toward the observation chamber door. Some of the older masters have accused me of favoritism. Mordo's eyebrow rose. Because of Naruto. Yes, they believe I have given him special treatment because of his unusual origins and talent. Mordo looked genuinely confused. But you have given him special attention. The Ancient One nodded. Of course, because he's worth watching. She turned toward the projection. But perhaps they need to see what kind of monster he actually is. Mordo's eyes widened. So this is a demonstration. Exactly. The Ancient One smiled. Let's see if they still think I'm playing favorites after they watch him. Mordo stared at her. For a moment, he wondered whether the woman sitting beside him was actually the same Sorcerer Supreme he had served for years. She was behaving differently, more playful, more mischievous, almost like she was enjoying herself. Then the Ancient One reached toward the table. Could you pass me the popcorn? Mordo stopped. Popcorn. The Ancient One nodded. Yes. Mordo slowly looked down. A bowl of popcorn sat on the table. He had no idea when it had appeared. He looked at the Ancient One. She simply stared at the projection. Mordo slowly shook his head. Then, with a resigned expression, he passed the bowl to her. Here, thank you. The Ancient One took a handful. Mordo sat beside her. His expression remained deeply confused. Master, are you enjoying this? The Ancient One looked at him. Immensely. Mordo sighed. I think I preferred it when you were intimidating. She smiled. Give it time. Mordo immediately regretted saying anything. Meanwhile, Kamar-Taj main hall. At the same time, another magical projection of the snowy battlefield appeared in the main hall of Kamar-Taj, where several senior masters and disciples had gathered to watch. The image showed Naruto, Wanda and Pietro facing the enormous Chimera. One of the older masters folded his arms. There she goes again. Another frowned. The Ancient One clearly favors Naruto. A few disciples exchanged glances. He receives private training, special attention, and now she has personally taken him on another mission. But another master immediately disagreed. Because he has earned it. He pointed toward the projection. That boy mastered the fundamentals of the mystic arts in months. We call him the monster of mystic arts for a reason. You can't do half of what he achieved in just few months in your lifetime. Another nodded. His potential is extraordinary. The first master remained unconvinced. Potential doesn't justify favoritism. The hall became divided between those criticizing the Ancient One and those defending her decision. Then the projection suddenly showed Naruto stepping forward as the Chimera roared. The room fell silent. One of the senior masters narrowed his eyes. Perhaps we should watch the test before judging anything. Another quietly nodded. Agreed. All eyes returned to the magical projection. None of them yet realized that the Ancient One had brought them to watch for precisely this reason. Back in the mountains, the Chimera emerged from the snow. 5 meters of claws, horns, scales and muscle. Its enormous jaws opened. Flames flickered inside its mouth. Pietro stared. That thing is enormous. Wanda remained calm, though her eyes were slightly widened. Naruto, meanwhile, was smiling. Pietro looked at him. Why are you smiling? Naruto shrugged. I've fought worse. Pietro stared. Worse than that? Yes. When? Long story. The Chimera roared. Naruto stepped forward. Let's make this quick. Wanda raised both hands. Crimson energy exploded around her. A massive mystical circle formed beneath the beast. The ground trembled. The Chimera suddenly became trapped. Boom. Red chains erupted from the circle and wrapped around its legs, torso and neck. The creature roared and pulled against them. Wanda gritted her teeth. Got it. Naruto smiled. Nice. He raised his hand. An eldritch magic circle appeared before his palm. Multiple rings rotated around one another. Golden-orange energy gathered inside. Naruto fired. Boom. The blast struck the Chimera directly in its eye. The beast screamed. Smoke filled the battlefield. When it cleared, the Chimera had lost one eye. Pietro stared, then grinned. Well, he pointed. Now it's a one-eyed monster. Naruto's expression immediately changed. Pietro. What? Don't. Why? The Chimera slowly turned its remaining eye toward Pietro. Pietro's smile disappeared. Oh, Naruto sighed. I was going to tell you. Tell me what? That it understands human speech. Pietro stared. You knew that. I assumed it was obvious. It's a giant mythical monster. Exactly. Pietro's expression dropped. Quote, I may have made a mistake. Naruto smiled. Yes. The Chimera's tail suddenly whipped around. Pietro barely had time to react. Boom. The tail slammed into him. He was launched across the mountain range. Wanda's eyes widened. Pietro. Naruto stared into the distance. A massive cloud of snow exploded several miles away. He remained completely calm. He's fine. Wanda looked at him. How do you know? He has the magical armor. Another explosion echoed through the mountains. Then Pietro's distant voice followed. Why does every monster we meet hate me? Naruto grinned. See. Wanda sighed in relief. Back at Kamar-Taj, Mordo stared at the projection. The Ancient One calmly ate another piece of popcorn. Mordo looked at her. You knew that would happen. The Ancient One smiled. I suspected it. You could have warned Pietro. He'll remember the lesson better this way. Mordo looked at the projection again. Naruto was now walking toward the Chimera. Wanda was preparing another spell. Pietro was climbing out of a crater several miles away. Mordo slowly shook his head. That boy has only been here for 2.5 years. The Ancient One's eyes remained fixed on Naruto. Yes. Mordo watched Naruto's chakra begin mixing with mystical energy. Quote, And somehow, you're the one acting differently around him. The Ancient One smiled. Perhaps. Mordo's expression became suspicious. Master. You're enjoying this far too much. The Ancient One took another handful of popcorn. I have no idea what you mean. Mordo stared at her, then looked back at Naruto. The blonde ninja was standing in front of a 5-meter mythical chimera while casually preparing another attack. Mordo sighed. No one is safe around that boy. He paused. Quote, Apparently not even his master. The Ancient One smiled. Now you're beginning to understand. The magical projection flickered. Naruto's eyes glowed with determination. Wanda's crimson aura intensified. Pietro finally returned to the battlefield at incredible speed. And the Ancient One leaned forward slightly. Her eyes were fixed almost entirely on Naruto. Let's see just how far you've come. The battle was only beginning. The battle continued, and it continued, and continued. For nearly another 30 minutes, the snowy mountains became a battlefield of crimson chains, golden-orange mystical energy, shattered ice and enormous explosions. Wanda repeatedly restrained the chimera whenever it attempted to charge, her chaos magic wrapping around its limbs like living crimson serpents. Pietro darted across the battlefield at impossible speeds, striking the beast from different angles while his mystical armor protected his body from the brutal wind and the monster's attacks. Naruto, meanwhile, was doing something that made absolutely no sense to anyone watching. He was experimenting. Try this. A golden mystical shield appeared. Boom. The chimera smashed through it. Okay. Naruto formed several rotating rings. How about this? Boom. The chimera destroyed those too. Naruto scratched his cheek. You're really committed to making me work for this, huh? The chimera answered with a roar. Pietro zipped past it and shouted, I think it doesn't like you. Naruto shouted back, I noticed. Wanda couldn't help laughing. The battle continued until the three began coordinating almost instinctively. Wanda immobilized the creature. Pietro attacked its blind side. Naruto followed with a mystical blast. The chimera broke free. Pietro distracted it. Wanda chained it again. Naruto attacked. Again. And again. Their teamwork became increasingly seamless. They weren't three individual fighters anymore. They were beginning to fight like a team. Eventually, however, the chimera collapsed onto one knee. It was exhausted. Wanda lowered her hands slightly. Pietro landed beside her. Is it finally done? Naruto looked at the creature. Not quite. He stepped forward. Something about his expression had changed. The joking disappeared. His eyes became focused. He slowly raised his right hand. A small circle of eldritch energy appeared in his palm. Pietro frowned. What's that? Naruto didn't answer. The magical circle began rotating. Then another appeared. And another. Golden-orange mystical energy started spiraling around his hand. The masters watching from Kamar-Taj immediately noticed something strange. The energy wasn't forming a conventional spell. It was being compressed, condensed, rotated, over and over. Naruto's chakra control had taught him something that most masters had never considered. Mystic energy didn't have to be used only in the shapes traditionally taught by Kamar-Taj. It could be manipulated like chakra. His hand began spinning faster. The eldritch energy condensed into a small sphere. The sphere grew, then grew again. Rotating rings of mystical energy surrounded it. The air around Naruto began vibrating. Wanda's eyes widened. Pietro, I see it. Naruto's blue eyes sharpened. All right, he grinned. Let's see if this works. The sphere became enormous. A violent spiral of pure golden orange eldritch energy formed in his hand. No chakra, no sage mode, no karama, no other power, just the mystic arts. Naruto stepped forward. Eldritch Rasengan. He slammed the sphere directly into the Chimera. Boom! A gigantic vortex of mystical energy erupted across the mountain. Snow exploded into the air. The ground cracked. The Chimera was completely engulfed in the spiraling energy before the attack finally dissipated. Silence. The snow slowly settled. The Chimera collapsed. Defeated. Naruto stood in the center of the crater, his clothes covered in snow. He looked at his hand. It worked. Kamar-Taj. Nobody spoke. The magical projection continued showing the battlefield. Every master in the main hall stared at the image. Mordo's mouth was slightly open. Several senior masters looked completely stunned. Even the Ancient One was astonished. One of the masters finally found his voice. How? Another master stared at the projection. How did he create that? He formed a physical sphere entirely from eldritch energy. That's impossible. He didn't use chakra. He didn't use any other energy. He compressed pure mystical energy. The Ancient One remained silent. Her eyes stayed fixed on Naruto. She understood what he had done. Naruto had taken the fundamental principles behind the Rasengan, rotation, compression and controlled energy density, and applied them to an entirely different energy system. Mystic energy. He hadn't simply copied a spell. He had created something new. Mordo slowly looked toward the Ancient One. Did you teach him that? The Ancient One shook her head. No. Mordo stared at the projection again. Then, he invented it. The Ancient One smiled faintly. Apparently. Mordo slowly rubbed his forehead. I am beginning to understand why you call him your most unusual student. The Ancient One's expression became amused. I never called him that. Mordo looked at her. Everyone else does. Fair. Back in the mountains. Naruto finally sat down in the snow. That, he breathed heavily, was actually exhausting. Pietro immediately appeared beside him. What was that? Naruto blinked. What? That giant spinning magical ball. Oh, Naruto smiled. That, yeah. Pietro practically looked like a child who had just discovered a new toy. Teach me. Naruto stared at him. You can't for now. I don't care. You literally don't have the mastery of eldritch energy it requires. I'll still learn it. Naruto laughed. You really are determined. Wanda quietly walked over. She first looked at her brother's antics. She sighed and totally ignored him. Then she conjured a small crystal clear glass of water with her magic and handed it to Naruto. Here. Naruto accepted it. Thanks. Wanda smiled. That was amazing. A faint blush appeared across her cheeks. Naruto smiled. Thanks. Pietro looked between them. I want a water bottle too. Wanda immediately dismissed the water. Get your own. Pietro stared at Wanda in disbelief. Wait, why did you give him one? He asked, pointing at Naruto. Why not spare another one for me? Wanda didn't even bother looking at him. She simply ignored him and continued jabbing at him with her finger. Pietro's expression slowly fell. Seriously, still nothing. Wanda finally glanced at him with an utterly unimpressed expression. Maybe because Naruto actually deserves it. Pietro placed a hand over his chest dramatically. Wow, betrayed by my own sister. Wanda rolled her eyes. I swear, sometimes I wish I could just disown you. Pietro froze. His mouth fell open. For a moment, he looked like his entire world had just collapsed. You disown your own brother. Wanda shrugged. If you keep annoying me, absolutely. Pietro looked completely defeated, his shoulders slumping as he muttered, I can't believe this. Meanwhile, Wanda secretly glanced at Naruto, a small, satisfied smile appearing on her face. That's what you get for messing with my Naruto. Naruto, who had been watching the entire exchange, finally burst out laughing. Pietro shot him an offended glare. Don't laugh. This is a family tragedy. That only made Naruto laugh harder. Pietro looked even more offended. I don't understand why everyone keeps bullying me. Sometime later, after resting, the three returned to Kamar-Taj. Naruto carried the unconscious Chimera's enormous carcass with a combination of sealing techniques and brute strength. The moment they entered the main hall, several elderly masters specializing in mystical creatures practically descended upon the corpse. Their eyes lit up. Remarkable. I've only seen illustrations of this species. Look at the horn structure. The scales. The regenerative tissue. Careful. Don't damage the tail. Naruto blinked. One elderly master looked at him. May we examine it? Naruto shrugged. Sure. The researchers immediately surrounded the creature. They began examining every part of it with the enthusiasm of children discovering Christmas presents. Within minutes, they had carefully sealed the carcass for study. Then, poof, gone. Pietro stared at the empty floor. He whistled. Those old geezers move faster than they looks. Naruto laughed. Apparently they really wanted that thing. Few days later, everyone gathered in the main hall as per the Ancient One's instruction. The atmosphere was unusually formal. The usual conversations had disappeared. Even the masters who normally spoke among themselves stood in complete silence, sensing that something important was about to happen. At the front of the hall stood the Ancient One. Naruto, Wanda, Pietro, Mordo, and the other masters gathered before her. The Ancient One slowly looked across the room before her gaze settled on Naruto. There is something I must announce. Her voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable weight behind her words. And it is something that should not wait any longer. Seeing how serious the Sorcerer Supreme was, the entire hall fell silent. The Ancient One smiled faintly. Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto straightened immediately. Yes, I have watched your growth for the past 2.5 years. Her expression became proud, and you have exceeded every expectation I had of you. Naruto remained quiet as she continued. You have mastered the mystic arts faster than any student I have personally trained. A few of the masters exchanged impressed glances. But more importantly, the Ancient One paused. You have demonstrated the wisdom, restraint, and judgment required to wield such power responsibly. She looked around the hall. And I am certain that everyone here witnessed your might few days ago. Several masters nodded. The Ancient One's smile widened slightly. And I am equally certain that no one here will disagree with what I am about to say. Naruto's eyebrow twitched. Why do I suddenly feel like this is going somewhere I won't like? The Ancient One turned toward him. Therefore, she allowed the silence to linger for a moment. Today, her voice echoed throughout the hall. I pass on the title of Sorcerer Supreme to Naruto Uzumaki. For one brief second, nothing happened. It was as though the entire hall had stopped functioning. A master froze with food halfway to his mouth. Another stared at Naruto with his jaw hanging open. Someone in the back actually dropped their cup. Pietro's eyes widened. Wait, what? Then the entire hall erupted. Applause thundered through the chamber. Students cheered. Masters congratulated Naruto. Pietro nearly jumped out of his seat in shock. Wanda's face lit up with an enormous smile. Mordo simply looked at Naruto with a proud nod. Naruto, however, was completely frozen. His brain had apparently stopped processing information. What? The Ancient One chuckled. You heard me. Naruto slowly pointed at himself. Me, yes, but, he looked around the room as if expecting someone to reveal that this was some elaborate joke. Are you sure? The Ancient One smiled. Completely. Naruto's eyes widened. But I thought. The Ancient One gently interrupted him. I know what destiny once intended. The room gradually quieted again. Stephen Strange was destined to surpass many of us and eventually become the Sorcerer Supreme. Several masters exchanged surprised looks. Even Mordo's expression became more serious. But destiny, the Ancient One looked directly into Naruto's eyes, is not absolute. Her words carried a strange weight. And after everything I have witnessed over these past 2.5 years. She stepped forward. I believe you are more worthy of this title than Stephen Strange could ever become. Naruto's mind went completely blank. Wait, what? I'm supposed to be the Sorcerer Supreme. Before he could even form another question, the Ancient One reached into the folds of her robes and retrieved a small, ancient container. She opened it. Inside rested an ancient golden amulet. Naruto's eyes widened. He immediately recognized it, the Eye of Agamotto, and within it, the Time Stone. The room became deathly quiet. This, Naruto stared at the artifact. The Ancient One carefully lifted it from the container. As my successor, you will now bear the responsibility of wielding and protecting this power. She extended the amulet toward him. Naruto hesitated for a moment before carefully accepting it. The instant the artifact touched his hand, a strange sensation passed through him. Not power. Not exactly. It felt more like the weight of an entire legacy being placed upon his shoulders. Naruto stared down at the eye. The Ancient One smiled. Protect it well. Naruto slowly nodded. I will. The moment he said those words, the hall erupted once again. Thunderous applause filled the chamber. Wanda smiled proudly. Pietro was still staring at Naruto in disbelief. Unbelievable, he muttered. He gets everything. Naruto glanced at him. Did you say something? Nope. Meanwhile, at the very back of the chamber, one man remained completely silent. Caecilius. He hadn't applauded. He hadn't smiled. He simply stood there, staring at Naruto. His expression was impossible to read. Slowly, his gaze shifted from Naruto to the eye of Agamotto. His eyes narrowed. For the briefest moment, something dark flickered within them. An ambition, a resentment, a desire that had been quietly growing for years. Then Caecilius lowered his gaze and concealed his expression. No one noticed. Not the Ancient One, not Mordo, not Wanda, not even Naruto. The celebration continued around them. But in the shadows of Kamar-Taj, something had just changed, and Naruto had no idea that by accepting the title of Sorcerer Supreme, he had also placed himself directly in the path of the man who would one day betray them all. The next morning, Kamar-Taj was unusually quiet, until a disciple came running through the halls. Masters, everyone turned. What happened? The disciple came rushing into the main hall, breathing heavily. His face was pale, and his expression immediately told everyone that something was terribly wrong. Mordo stepped forward. What happened? The disciple struggled to catch his breath. Caecilius. He paused, swallowing hard. He has gone rogue. The entire room fell silent. Mordo's expression immediately hardened, but the disciple wasn't finished. And it's not just him. He looked around the room before continuing. Lucane Aster, brunette zealot, tall zealot, and blonde zealot. His voice trembled slightly. They followed him. Silence. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The Ancient One's expression remained calm, but her eyes had become noticeably colder. Mordo stepped closer. When? The disciple took a breath. They infiltrated the central library last night. A few masters exchanged alarmed glances. And, the disciple hesitated. They killed the masters who were guarding the entrance. The atmosphere instantly became heavier. Wanda's expression darkened. Pietro's usual playful demeanor disappeared. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Mordo clenched his fists. What did they want from the library? He demanded. The disciple hesitated again. Whatever the answer was, he clearly didn't want to say it. But eventually, he forced the words out. They stole several pages from the Book of Cagliostro. Mordo's eyes widened. What? The single word echoed through the hall. The Book of Cagliostro was no ordinary book. If Caecilius had deliberately stolen pages from it, then this wasn't a simple act of betrayal. It meant he was searching for something. Something powerful. Something dangerous. Soon the news spread through Kamar-Taj like wildfire. Masters gathered. Students whispered. Everyone was shocked. Everyone. Except two people. The Ancient One stood silently near a window. She looked toward the sky. She had already seen fragments of this future. Her own death. Dormammu. The dark dimension. Caecilius. But something was different. The timing. This was happening much earlier than it should have. She knew why. Naruto. Another butterfly effect. His arrival had changed the timeline again. The Ancient One smiled faintly. So it begins. She didn't look frightened. She simply accepted it. Meanwhile, Naruto stood nearby with his arms crossed. He knew exactly what was supposed to happen. Except, not yet. In the original timeline, Caecilius' rebellion and the events surrounding the Ancient One were supposed to occur later. Much later. Naruto sighed. Of course. He looked toward the ceiling. Why does everything I touch happen early? He rubbed his forehead. Is Mephisto going to show up next? Nobody answered. But far away in a hell-like dimension, a red-skinned man, who was sitting on a blazing throne, sneezed. Naruto looked toward the Ancient One. His expression became serious. You. The Ancient One turned. Naruto pointed at her. You're not dying. She raised an eyebrow. Naruto's expression hardened. Not on my watch, old hag. For a moment, the Ancient One simply stared at him. Then, she smiled. A warm, knowing smile. Very well. Naruto nodded. Good. He turned away. But behind that confident expression, his mind was already racing. Because he knew what was coming. And this time, he wasn't going to let the Ancient One face it alone. Several months passed. There was no sign of Caecilius and his followers. There had been no sightings. No messages. No attacks. Nothing. It was like they had completely vanished from the face of the earth. For a while, even Naruto had begun to wonder whether the timeline had somehow changed enough to prevent the events he remembered from ever happening. Then, one morning, Kamar-Taj received an emergency signal. Not an ordinary distress call. A Sanctum SOS. It was a signal created specifically for one situation. If Caecilius or his zealots attacked one of Earth's sanctums, the master guarding that sanctum was to immediately send the warning to Kamar-Taj. The signal had come from the New York sanctum. New York. Naruto's house. Naruto was asleep. Completely asleep. For once, there were no monsters to fight, no mystical experiments to test, no ancient masters asking him to save reality, and no Pietro loudly complaining about his training. Then, beep, beep, beep. Naruto's eyes snapped open. He stared at the magical alert floating above his bedside table. Seriously. The alarm continued. Naruto rubbed his eyes. Can't the apocalypse wait until after breakfast? Then he read the message. Sanctum under attack. His expression immediately changed. Oh, he was out of bed instantly. A quick gesture sent his clothes flying onto his body through a simple mystic arts spell. Another movement formed a sling ring in his hand. Golden sparks erupted. Naruto stepped through. Alright, let's see what kind of headache we're dealing with. New York Sanctum. Naruto emerged inside the sanctum. The first thing he noticed was the silence. The second was the destruction. Furniture had been thrown across the room. Ancient mystical artifacts lay scattered across the floor. Several walls were covered in blackened marks. And standing in the center of the ruined chamber were 4 figures. Naruto's eyes narrowed. Lucian Aster, brunette zealot, tall zealot, blonde zealot, while their leader Caecilius himself was nowhere to be seen. But Naruto immediately noticed something disturbing. Their eyes. Dark veins and blackened markings surrounded them. A corrupt mystical energy radiated from their bodies. Naruto sighed. Well, that's definitely Dormammu. So, you guys actually managed to contact that oversized, interdimensional forehead? He asked the emotionless idiots standing before him. The 4 zealots' eyes twitched and they immediately attacked without any heads up. Naruto barely moved. The first unleashed a magical blade. Naruto caught it between 2 fingers. The zealot stared. What? Naruto flicked his wrist. Boom. The man flew across the room. Another attempted to strike from behind. Naruto vanished. Flash. He reappeared behind the zealot and kicked him through a stone pillar. The third fired a barrage of crimson energy. Naruto created a shield. The attacks shattered against it. Guys. Naruto sighed. You really should have picked someone weaker. The fourth charged. Naruto simply tapped his forehead. The zealot collapsed unconscious. The entire fight had lasted less than a minute. Naruto looked at the 4 unconscious men. That was disappointing. He quickly bound them with sealing formulas before opening another portal. Back to Kamar-Taj. Naruto returned with the 4 unconscious zealots sealed and incapacitated. Several masters immediately gathered around them. But Naruto's attention quickly shifted. Where's the Ancient One? Mordo answered. She received information regarding Caecilius. Naruto's expression changed. Where? London. Naruto froze. London. His memories immediately supplied the answer. The London Sanctum. The confrontation. The destruction. The Ancient One. Caecilius. And something far worse. Naruto tried to remain calm. The Ancient One went after him. Mordo nodded. Yes. Naruto sighed. Of course she did. He knew the Ancient One could handle Caecilius. Normally. But something about this situation felt wrong. Very wrong. Naruto immediately created another sling ring portal. I'll check on her. Mordo frowned. Naruto. But Naruto had already stepped through. London Sanctum. Naruto emerged. Then froze. His eyes widened. The London Sanctum was gone. Not damaged. Not partially destroyed. Gone. The surrounding area had been devastated. Pieces of the building lay scattered across the street. Smoke drifted through the air. Naruto slowly looked around. No. He activated his sensory abilities. Nothing. Then he felt it. A strange distortion in space. Naruto's eyes narrowed. The mirror dimension. He immediately understood. They must be fighting inside there. Naruto raised his hand. Golden orange energy formed around his fingers. A sling ring portal opened. But instead of leading somewhere physical, it opened into the distorted reflection of reality. Naruto stepped through. The world immediately changed. Buildings stretched impossibly into the sky. Roads twisted. Gravity seemed meaningless. The entire dimension was warped. And then Naruto saw them. His eyes widened. His breath caught. Standing in front of him was a dark, corrupted humanoid figure. Its body radiated an unnatural black energy. And lying on the ground before it was the Ancient One. Naruto's expression completely changed. For the first time in a long time. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't joking. He wasn't experimenting. His eyes became cold. You. The dark figure slowly turned toward him. Naruto clenched his fists. You were supposed to be a problem later. He stepped forward. Looks like the timeline really does hate me. The Ancient One remained motionless on the ground. Naruto's chakra began surging. Mystical energy gathered around him. His eyes sharpened. Nobody touches my master. The dark figure raised its hand. Naruto's aura exploded. That's all for today. And before we end this video, question time. What was the first forbidden jutsu Naruto learned in the anime? The first 5 to answer correctly will get a shoutout in my next video. But be quick, you only have 2 days to answer. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing what if stories in the future. Until next time, see you guys in the next video. Goodbye, farewell, and sayonara.